Happy BookTube. I'm talking about a book, but I don't have it. I read it online. It's Flatland by Edwin Abbott, a romance of many dimensions about these shapes, and they're flat like a shadow, and they're moving on the floor flat. And then a ball from outer space comes and talks to them about the third dimension, some that they just couldn't even see from down there. So I'm going to read you a couple direct quotes. Here's one. Furious at his perversity, and especially indignant that he professed to be ignorant of my sex, I retorted in no measure, besotted being, you think yourself the perfection of existence, while you are in reality the most imperfect imbecile. You profess to see where you can see nothing but a point. You plume yourself on inferring the existence of a straight line. But I can see straight lines and infer the existence of angles, triangles, squares, pentagons, hexagons, and even circles. Why waste more words? Suffice it is that I am the completion of your incomplete self. You are a line. I am the line of lines, called in my country a square. And even I, infinitely superior though I am to you, am of little account among the great nobles of Flatland, whence I have come to visit you in the hope of enlightening your ignorance. Now, the core lessons, it says that the square is visited by the sphere from Spaceland. The sphere attempts to explain this third dimension, but the square can't understand because he's pulled out of this world into Spaceland, which is different from Flatland. Once in Spaceland, though, the square realizes the limitation of his own perception, and he can see the insides of his home in Flatland and realize that his world is just one of many. It says, when the square attempts to teach the gospel of three dimensions back in Flatland, they thought he was a criminal and they imprisoned him, highlighting the dangers of new ideas and the difficulty of challenging deeply held narrow views. The square contemplates even a fourth dimension, an extra height after visiting Spaceland, hinting that there's always a higher level of understanding. It was from 1884, Edwin Abbott, mathematical novella that has the comparison between two-dimensional worlds, Flatland, and the three-dimensional world, Spaceland. It satires Victorian society. It's the nature of Flatland, it's like a sheet of paper. And Spaceland is inhabited by solid beings like cubes instead of flat like a square. Here's a direct quote. I answer that though we cannot see angles, we can infer them, and with this great precision, our sense of touch, simulated by necessity and developed by a long training, enables us to distinguish angles far more accurately than your sense of sight when unaided by a rule or measure of angles. Now, I must omit to explain that we have great natural helps. It is with us a law of nature that the brain of the isosceles class shall begin at a half a degree or 30 minutes and shall increase, if it increase at all, by a half a degree in every generation, so that the goal of 60 degrees is reached when the condition of serfdom is quitted and the free man enters the class of regulars. Now, in Flatland, society has a hierarchy. Males were considered the higher class, but there above that was elite, the circles of priests, priesthood. these were circular figures, and they maintained power through a law that restricts social mobility for lower classes. The state uses artificial compression or surgery to reform the smart but low status rebellious triangles into regular shapes and absorb them into the elite or eliminate them. Women were considered thin, straight lines and dangerous due to their sharp ends. They were regarded as having no intellectual ability. The evolutionary law was that a male child has one more side than his father, allowing for the slow upward mobility, except for soldiers and workmen. And the cultural rule was that houses are pentagonal, as of the sharp edges of triangles and squares were banned from being banned for being dangerous to passerbys. How about the site of a line of battle between 20,000 isosceles facing about and exchanging the somber black of their bases for the orange and purple of the two sides, including their acute angle, the militia of the equilateral triangles, tricolored in red, white, and blue, mauve, ultramarine, gambrose, and burnt umber of the square artillerymen, rapidly rotating near their vermilion guns, the dashing and flashing of the 5-colored and 6-colored pentagons and hexagons careering their field in the offices of surgeons, geometricians, and aides de camp. All these may well have been sufficient to render credible the famous story of how the illustrious circle, overcome by artistic beauty of the forces of his command, threw aside his marshal's baton and royal's crown, exclaiming that henceforth exchanged them for the artist's pencil. How great the glorious sensuous development of these days must have been, in part, indicated by a very large language and vocabulary of the period. The common utterances of the common citizens in the time of the color revolt seem to have been suffused with a rich tinge or word of thought, and to the era we are even now indebted for our finest poetry, and whatever rhythm still remains in the more scientific utterance of these modern days. The size of the sides would, of course, be dependent upon the age of the individual. A female at birth would only be about an inch long, while a tall adult woman might extend a foot. As to the males in every class, it might be roughly said that the length of an adult sides, when added together, is 2 feet or a little more, but the side of our sides is not under consideration. I am speaking of the equality of sides. It does not need much reflection to see that the whole of social life in Flatland rests upon the fundamental fact that nature wills all figures to have their sides equal. If our sides were unequal, our angles might be unequal. Instead, we are being sufficient to feel or estimate a single angle in order to determine the form of an individual would be necessary to ascertain each angle by the experiment of feeling, but life would be too short for such a tremendous, tedious grouping. The whole science and art of sight recognition would at once perish. Feeling, so far as it is an art, it would no longer survive. Intercourse would become perilous or impossible, and there would be an end to all confidence, all forethought. No one would be safe in making the simple social arrangements. In a word, civilization would relapse into barbarianism. And I guess the most important thing I think you should know about Flatland is the circular neo-therapeutic gymnasium. Okay, this is described as an institution in chapter 11 concerning the priests, and it served as a state-run facility where the polygonal parents send their children in a desperate, often fatal attempt to upgrade their social status to a circle. The gymnasium is used to refine the angles of polygonal children, specifically those on the brink of becoming circles, through artificial compression or expansion. It's a dangerous, cruel process designed to turn a polygon into a circle by increasing the number of their sides to make them look circular. The process is highly risky, and rarely 1 out of 10 children survive, most of them dying, being sent to the adjacent non-therapeutic cemetery. It serves as a way for the ruling circle class to maintain control, as successful children are enabled while others are kept in honorable confinement for life. There's irregulars, okay? It says regulars are polygons, which represent elite and stables. Irregulars are seen as mentally or morally impaired, representing threats in the state. According to Part 1, Section 7, newborns with deviations of even half a degree are often destroyed. The state employs physicians to reshape curable irregulars through the compression and extension. Some irregulars are intelligent, making them dangerous agitators and leaders of rebellions. It is noted in some, though rare, that they do manage to enter the power structure and are generally treated as societal outcasts. Here's a direct quote. Many a promising child is sacrificed in this way. Well, I'll read it one above it. Okay. Art also steps in to help the process of higher evolution. Our physicians have discovered that the small, tender sides of an infant polygon of the higher class can be fractured with his whole frame reset with such exactness, such as a polygon or 200 or 300 sides. By no means always, for the process is attended with serious risk, but sometimes overleaps 200 or 300 generations, as it were, doubles a stroke, number of progenitors, and the nobility of his descent. Many a promising child is sacrificed this way. Scarcely 1 out of 10 survives. Yet so strong is the parental ambition among those polygons who are, as it were, on the fringe of the circle class, that it is very rare to find a nobleman in that position of society who has neglected to place his firstborn in the circle non-therapeutic gymnasium before he has attained the age of month. There's another one. That's a long one. It is the merit of the circles that they have effectually suppressed those ancient heresies which led men to the energy and sympathy in vain belief that conduct depends upon will, effort, training, encouragement, praise, or anything else but configuration. It was Pantocyclus, the illustrious circle mentioned above, the queller of the color revolt, who first convinced mankind that the configuration makes the man. That if, for example, you are born an isosceles with 2 uneven sides, you will assuredly go wrong unless you have them made even, for which purpose you must go to the isosceles hospital. Similarly, if you are a triangle or a square or a polygon born with any irregularity, you must be taken to one of the regular hospitals to have your disease cured. Otherwise, you'll end your days in state prison or by the angle of the state executioner. All faults or defects, from the slight misconduct in the most flagitious crime. Theoretically, this doctrine is unquestionable. He practices drawbacks in dealing with the isosceles. If the rascal pleads that he cannot help stealing because of his unevenness, you reply, for that very reason, because he cannot help being a nuisance to his neighbor, that you, the magistrate, cannot help sentencing him to be consumed, and there's the end of the matter. I don't want to keep reading, but I want to let you know that this is a really good book, and I hope you read it, and I hope this video made you want to read it. It says there's lower class polygons, isosceles triangles, demand the right to use the color to improve their social status, leading to a mass violence. The ruling circle violently suppresses the rebellion, banning color and enforcing strict social hierarchy. It's a chromatic sedition. The Universal Color Bill was proposed, allowing the shapes to use color. The lower classes sought to use the color to blend in with the higher class, and many cited polygons disrupting the rigid social order. The movement, led by the chromaticites, caused chaos. The military class, which was the isosceles triangle, supported the color, resulting in 23 circles dying in domestic disputes. The ruling circles used their superior intellect and strategic advantage, encouraging the rebels to fight among themselves, and the revolt was crushed, resulting in the annihilation of thousands of isosceles soldiers by their own kind. Color was entirely abolished and made illegal, except for the highest and most esoteric university classes. The secret of creating color was restricted, and only with the chief circle knowing the technique, which they passed on to their successor. The square who's the narrator of the book. He is imprisoned in the state prison or the state asylum. He is incarcerated for treason, specifically for heresy. After returning from Spaceland's 3D and trying to spread the truth about the higher dimensions, the high priest, or the chief circle, inspects the state prison annually and visits a square who is held in solitary confinement, and the priest quizzes him and asking why was I any better, referring to his sanity and his belief in the higher dimension. And the square is unable to convince his fellow inhabitants of the truth and is held there to keep social order, and his revelations are considered dangerous by the ruling class. Social order dictated that all male polygons had equal length sides, because if they were unequal, the angles would be unequal, making the social classification based on sharp angles impossible. Regular shapes allow citizens to identify class by looking at the angles, whereas unequal sides would necessitate tedious physical contact to determine the shape, causing chaos.